it's not a discussion anymore amongst them it's not a discussion if true artificial intelligence will start to rival human intellect. The only thing that is of discussion nowadays is when. And is it going to be as you mentioned, the Kurzweil singularity, and you feel that is it going to be in 2030, 35? Is it going to be, as we maintain, by 2025, you will pass someone in the hallway and you won't be able to tell if it's a human or an android. And I think that's the real difference, is that just the time horizon. If it's going to be in the next 6 years, if it's going to be in the next 11 years. And it's inevitable at this point that you will get to the point where these agents start to mimic human intellect.
That is Chetan Dube, the CEO at IPsoft, an American multinational technology company which primarily focuses on artificial intelligence. IPsoft has just over 2,000 employees in 15 countries. Prior to working at IPsoft, Chetan served as an assistant professor at New York University, where his research was focused on deterministic, finite state computing engines. Don't ask me what that is or what that means. Today's intriguing conversation is all about AI, both the past and the future. You will hear what kind of AI IPsoft is currently designing and building, whether or not AI can become as creative as humans, who or what Amelia is, and what we can do as individuals to prepare for what's to come. With Chetan's prediction that the workforce will be 50-50 digital and human by 2025, this is an important discussion you won't want to miss.
Well, dust the rust off your brain and focus on creativity and coming up with things that do not play the machines on their playing field. You will lose. Do not play on mundane, ordinary chores and say, I'm going to be the Luddite or neo-Luddite, and try and stop the machines from driving cars or flying planes or driving trucks. They're going to, because that's what they do. They are just more effective at that. Humans are more effective at, and will continue to be, at creativity.
This is Jacob Morgan, best-selling author, speaker, and futurist. Welcome to the Future of Work podcast, where every week I speak with C-level executives, business leaders, and authors to explore how the workplace is changing and what the future of work is going to look like. The goal of this show is to give you the insights, the ideas, and the inspiration to help future-proof your career and your organization. If you want to get access to more content, such as podcast transcriptions and information on working with me or having me keynote your next event, you can visit my website at thefutureorganization.com. If you want to take your education even further by getting access to courses that explore these themes in more depth, then check out futureofworkuniversity.com. Also, if you get a few seconds, please rate and review the podcast on iTunes or whatever your preferred channel is. It really helps the show, and I personally appreciate it, since the podcast does take quite a bit of effort to produce. In case you're interested in sponsoring the podcast or working with me, my email is jacob@thefutureorganization.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Future of Work podcast. My guest today is Chetan Dube. He is the CEO at IPsoft. So, Chetan, thank you so much for joining me today. Why don't we get started with a little bit of background information about you and IPsoft?
Thank you, Jacob, for having me on your podcast. IPsoft, prior to joining IPsoft, I was an assistant faculty at New York University, and part of my doctoral work at that time was being done with Professor Dennis Shasha, where I remember one summer afternoon, just like this one, walking into his offices and suggesting to him that we were using deterministic finite state machines to clone engineering brains. And given a couple of summers, we should be able to extend it to general intelligence. And he had this smile on his face that talked about the father of artificial intelligence, John McCarthy gave up on the problem, saying that it turned out to be a lot harder than anticipated. But you're of profound ignorance about the challenges that lay ahead, and you set sail. If the opening sentence of Turing's thesis, when he had said, "I propose for you to consider the question, can machines think?" If that has really haunted you for more than a couple of decades, you set sail into making real thinking machines possible. And it has been a pursuit that has lasted more than a couple of summers. It's now been about over 21 years now. But I think you can be the gauge of, when you meet Amelia, of how close is one company in sincerely knocking on that elusive Turing horizon of making really thinking machines possible.
And Amelia, for those people who don't know, that is something that, you know what? We should have Amelia on the podcast one day. I wonder how that would work to have her as a podcast guest. But for people not familiar with Amelia, can you give people a little bit of context around, I should say, who or what she is?
So Amelia, by the way, she would fare better than I would on the podcast, but that's not saying much. But Amelia is the cognitive agent, the embodiment of the epitomization of our general intelligence platform. Now, Amelia also graduates in college. She goes to college and becomes a banker in the form of One Bank, has graduated into becoming an insurance agent in the form of One Insurance, has gone into IT operations college and become a One Desk agent for handling service desk issues, has gone into call center management and gotten training there, and has become a co-pilot for call center operations. But the base platform for intelligence continues to be Amelia. And Amelia, the choice of the name to me was, I felt strongly about the fact that Amelia Earhart really challenged the conventional wisdom and the conventional horizons that had limited the ability of man at that time in the days of early flight. Nobody had really gone across around the globe, and she was the first one that tried to go right around the globe before somewhere in the Pacific. But I feel strongly about that concept, and that's why she was named after Amelia Earhart.
And how big is IPsoft? So how many employees do you guys have?
Just over 2,000.
2,000, okay. And so basically...
15 countries.
15 countries, okay. And you guys are basically, I mean, your entire reason for existence is to create these thinking machines, cognitive software, AI, technologies, all those different types of things, right?
That is our entire, that's not that.
Okay. So this is a fascinating area. And I've had a couple of people on the podcast in the past, CIOs, CTOs, et cetera, talking about AI. But not many people who are actually building and designing these things. And so what are, maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into what are you building? What are you creating? Because you guys are one of the world's leaders in this space. So what is it that you are actually working on and are trying to do?
Yeah, thank you, Jacob. It'd be a little self-serving for us to brand ourselves, but we've been kind enough to have all the leading analysts and partners of stature rate Amelia unequivocally to be the world leader in artificial intelligence. And I think what we are trying to do is to sincerely emulate human brain. So the difference lies in, there was an interesting article that came out from University of Nebraska just about a year ago that talked about, this was a research paper done by these professors and students at University of Nebraska that talked about the average IQ on a Stanford Binet score of 0 to 150 or 140. You have the average IQ of an 18-year-old being 98, average IQ of a 12-year-old being 84, and average IQ of a 6-year-old being 55. The average IQ of the smartest chatbot, as in the VPAs, the virtual personal assistants that exist in the market, was found to be 47.2. That's the IQ of less than a 6-year-old. The challenge that most CEOs and CIOs face today is how are they going to deliver good customer experience and good customer service from a 5-year-old's IQ. That is the challenge. And that's where our motivation has been to be able to deliver a solution and an agent that is of comparable intellect to human agents. And the way to model that, I think a large part of what has been done typically in the industry is that we have, if you talk to the CIO of global CIO of NTT Data, he'll tell you, Chris Fitzpatrick will tell you that it is mostly IVR. We are living in a world of IVR 2.0, which means that we are living in intelligent voice recognition 2.0. We still have the same decision trees, but we simply put a thin veneer of support vector machines in front, and we actually classify whatever you're saying instead of making it appear that we are making you press 17, press 11, press 13, press 14. That makes you drive crazy and makes you want to yell operator and representative. What we are doing is that we are putting a thin veneer of support vector classifier, which in essence is making it appear to you that we are understanding natural language. But what we are doing is taking the natural language that you speak and simply classifying it into one of the buckets. We're doing essentially the same thing, except that for the front little thin layer that we say, we map you to one of the buckets, and it works fantastically for shallow, where shallow intelligence is required, like atomic tasks. Book me a flight, cancel that reservation. What's the weather like outside? What is the temperature? Play me a song from the La Vie Rose. These things work fantastically for those atomic tasks, and those administrative and secretarial tasks also, it works fantastically. But does it really suffice when you want to do mortgage? Does it really suffice when you want to do a claims processing? Would it work for you if you want to do a actuarial analysis? And does it help you if you want to do a policy administration for an insurance company? That's where you need real intellect, not just a decision tree. And that's where you need to be able to really study human brain and say, what is the human brain doing? And human brain, the approach changes from looking at a decision tree to starting to look at the centers of human brains and human thought. And human brain has got a center for semantic, the thinking part, which is the hippocampus, and has got an episodic part, which is the frontal lobes, which are event-based memories, has got a center for analytic, which is doing trend analysis, and which has got a center right at the back of it, which is for affective emotional part. And of course, a language center, which is towards somewhere in the front and center. Those parts are the ones that make human brain. So you see the orthogonal difference in the approach. And I'm sorry this obviously is for those members of your podcast that like beautiful kidneys. This is the inside. This is the inside of the algorithms, where on one hand you have a typical decision tree algorithms that mimic IVR behavior. On the other side, you have algorithms that mimic human brain and its different centers of thought. And the difference in the results that you get are radically different.
So, quick question for you. I think probably most people listening to this podcast have at some point encountered an IVR. I mean, when you call your bank, when you call your cable provider, I've encountered many of them. And every time I do, I want to smack my head against the wall. It is frustrating. It's, oftentimes I just randomly push digits so that the IVR eventually gives up and says transferring you to a human. So it's extremely frustrating, yet a lot of companies still use them. So I'm really fascinated in how you create this more human-like AI, Amelia. So did you actually study human brains, or how do you even begin to emulate human thought and how the brain works? Because it just seems like a very, very difficult thing to do.
Actually, I underestimated the complexity of it. Taught a couple of summers, and it has taken us about 21 years. So you're spot on. Um, Human brain is by far the most profound and most fascinating machine at the same time that exists. And I think, to answer your question, I think that absolutely IVR is, as the paper. If you are interested, Jacob, I know that you've written about some of these things. I'll send you a copy of it. You can see that the average IQ that is represented by these IVR solutions are the equivalent of a 5-year-old. For instance, if you say to a typical banking agent, if you say, if I have more than $10,000 in my account, please transfer 2,000 of that to this person, to my investment account at 3 p.m. day after tomorrow. If you say that, almost all different banking applications that you find in the market will actually go ahead and say, we'll do the transfer. They will do the 2,000 transfer. If they are somewhat sophisticated, they will do it at the temporal time of 3 p.m. day after tomorrow. Almost none of them will actually be really aware of the conditional that says that if I have more than $10,000 in my bank account. And I think that if you had started to have a conversation, what we are doing is that we are mapping the utterance. We're mapping the utterance through many megabytes of training data that we have into a model for executing a DNN and a deep neural network, or it's mostly a shallow neural network. And we execute that, and we hope to be able to execute and perform the task that is requested. The challenge is that what is wrong with the IVR systems? One, fundamentally, they do not understand. A brain understands, a human being understands you. Switch me to a chatbot. It says nobody ever. Even if you are being serviced offshore and you are getting substandard quality, you would rather suffer with a human than say, no, please put me to a chatbot. So first, they don't understand you. So you need to really understand what is Jacob trying to say. And that requires the mimicking of human hippocampus. That requires an orchestration of a symbolic logic layer on top of the deep neural network layer, so that you can actually understand in a semantic tree the entire mind map of the person and what is the person trying to communicate to you. The second is that you also need to be able to, what is the other thing that IVRs don't do? Well, the moment you say, you do the classic application of which you will find dime a dozen, many different applications you will find for ordering pizza. You would say, I'd like to get a pizza, and you will say, what toppings? And you say pepperoni, and then you say what size, and you say medium, large, or this, and then you say, and what's your address? And you say, change my mind, I'd like an ice cream. And you'll be dead. IVRs are inflexible. And even if they are flexible somewhat, they cannot do it in a contextually aware, stateful manner. Humans can. So a true cognitive agent has to be able to switch from getting you a pizza to getting you an ice cream to back to getting you the pizza. And that's why you find yourself in a white jacket with an IVR. Even if you are heading down the wrong direction, an IVR will typically not allow you to be able to take a U-turn or to be able to context switch out unless you are pressing the odd combination of buttons that you pointed out. And if you have discovered that, Jacob, please share it with the rest of your audience.
I just randomly mash every button I could find until the IVR just loses its mind and says, you know what?
Yeah.
We're just going to send you to a human because we don't know what you're saying.
And then, that's exactly the experience that a lot of our customers have. And exactly the same. And the third part is that at IVR, you don't find any. Do they really understand that Jacob is getting frustrated? Do they have an affective connection with you? Do they have an emotional connection with you? Do they have an emotional EQ vector? Do they have a mood vector, which is the integration of EQ vectors? Do they have a personality vector, which is the integration of mood vectors that tries to be empathetic to you? McKinsey had an interesting research that said that the emotional quality and empathy of the response that you get from a customer care agent is more relevant to driving up the value of NPS, Net Promoter Score, as opposed to the logical component of the service that you're getting. And do you get that? So what is the difference with the IBR? That's a very insightful question. And why are they incapable of? First, they don't semantically truly understand you. Second, they really are not able to context switch in a stateful manner. Third, they're not able to have any emotional and affective connection with you. And fourth, which is very important, they're not able to learn. They do not learn. And a true cognitive agent, such as Amelia, is able to learn and automatically build the mind map. With every conversation, she's able to rapidly learn and continue to build the mind map. So I apologize for the elaborate nature of the answer to that question, but I think it is important to be able to distinguish a true cognitive agent from the typical chatbots or from the plethora of IVR solutions in the marketplace.
So why are so many companies, everyone hates IVRs. Why are so many companies using chatbots and IVRs if nobody likes them?
Everybody knows that McKinsey predicted that we are going to head into this automation of knowledge worker is going to be $14.6 trillion market. McKinsey predicted that 35% of the tasks of the global payroll costs are associated with knowledge worker, and that's going to be done by cognitive agents. So when you have a market of that unprecedented nature, you can expect there. I was told by the CEO of this forum that 6 years ago when we started, I think it has been a quest for 21 years now, but 6 years when we unveiled Amelia, there were no other chatbots in the marketplace. And now Gartner tells us there are 1,600 chatbots in the marketplace. So obviously, when you have such a big market, you will find everyone jump into the marketplace. And I think it's a welcome thing because I think you want to be able to invite the level of interest in the market. But you're also finding that there's a natural, the buyers are getting much more savvier. What you're finding that this is not the first generation buyers that are graduating from the POCs. What happened in the last couple of years was that you had to be able to sit in a board and you had to say that you had a digital strategy and you had to say that you were employing AI related agents. And so you had done some pilots and POCs. You had to say that because you did not want to be the other side of the digital Darwinistic curve, because we are living in a digital Darwinistic time. So you were piloting mostly, and so the buyer was the first generation experimentalist. And today we are finding it to be the buyers are getting much more sophisticated with what works and what, most importantly, what is able to drive good net promoter scores and what is not. And that's a welcome thing. You don't have the largest telco in Latin America and Telefonica being able to handle over 2.2 million calls in the month, last month itself, with an intent recognition success of 87.2%. Servicing with, at volume, the capabilities of having 610 concurrent sessions. Now that is true digital revolution. And the efficacy of it is borne by what they presented to their board, is that this is the largest digital workforce on the planet. This is their representation. And it is true too, because it is at scale, being able to do the job of several thousands of human agents.
How do you define AI? Because I feel like there's so many different definitions, and a lot of people are just calling their chatbots AI, they're calling their IVR AI, like everybody's using the word AI, but really what's happening is they're just taking these old technologies and calling it something else, probably because most people in the world are ignorant, or, they just don't understand what AI actually means or is. So how do you differentiate sort of true AI versus these old technologies that are just being rebranded as AI?
That's a great point, because AI has become mostly a marketing ploy. This microphone and this is artificial and this cognitive microphone that I'm speaking into, and the water I'm drinking is smart water, and the light is definitely a smart light in the conference room I'm sitting in.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Smart, all these terms.
That's exactly right. I would go back to McCarthy era, and I would go back to the fundamentals of artificial intelligence. And I think to me, and it's so much so that a managing director at right at the top at Accenture called it artificial intelligence. And it is true that we are living in artificial AI times to a large extent, exactly as you pointed out. But I think to me, as a student of this for now going on about 3 decades, I would say AI continues to be the ability for machines to mimic human intelligence. That is artificial intelligence.
Simple enough.
That's it.
You mentioned that you've been involved in this space for 3 decades. Can you share what it was like 3 decades ago or 30 years ago versus where we are today? So what could you do 30 years ago versus what are you now able to do 30 years later? Like, how much progress have we made?
Well, so there was the big AI winter. You know about the McCarthy and Minsky era, when, if you've been a student of this for long, you would identify with the fact that Minsky and there were predictions made that we would be able to rival human intellect in 10 years time frame, and this was in the 70s that we had confidence in artificial intelligence getting to that level of maturity. Obviously, we know that it entered into a period of what is classically in the research world known as AI winter, because the classic hype curve, the sense of exaggerated expectations, and the inability of the technology to be able to measure up to it. And so we had that classic hype curve that Gartner puts together, and we have endured that winter on the research side. But since then, there arose these deep neural networks that are, and depending on which variety of which flavor of deep neural networks you're subscribing to, whether it's long, short-term memory networks or recurrent memory, whichever one that you subscribe to, what DNN allowed us to be able to do is to, and the explosion of data allowed us to be able to do, is to be able to crunch massive amounts of data and have the computing power to be able to assimilate and to be able to decipher intent more accurately. Now that was one part of the equation. The connectionists lost. On one side, the deep neural networks, we just started to focus on the DNN models as opposed to worrying about the symbolic logic. The logic part of how human brains think was often put aside. But we find that over this period of time, what has happened is that the business world today has mimicked some of the transitions that we saw in the research world. Research world had a big, huge winter of AI, and the business world again had an excitement about AI, and then we see that a little bit in the last couple of years, we have seen that transition of like, well, I've got a bunch of pilots going, I've got this POC going, and I'm having marginal returns, I'm having problems with my net promoter scores, to now what we find welcome is that you're having the largest bank looking at 1.2 billion credit card transactions a year with digital agents. You're looking at the largest telcos in the world doing over 4.5 million calls a month with AI and getting good customer satisfaction, by the way. And that's the most important part. Good net promoter score. Not only do you actually get your cost of goods sold, your cost efficiencies, which is a given, but the fact that you're able to drive good net promoter scores. Classic example of that being 75% of the inbound calls, Allstate, for instance, done by humans, 4.6 minutes time to resolution. Done when assisted by Amelia, 4.2 time to resolution, 4.2 minutes. First time writes, 67% done by humans, 75% when assisted by Amelia. So you can see that AI and true AI, which is very rare, true AI cannot just make it. What is different in these years is that true AI has come of age. It can actually deliver not just equivalent, but in some cases superior than human experience because of its ability to assimilate knowledge and to be able to truly mimic human intelligence. And you are starting to see that in the examples that I'd given you, the Allstate and the Telefonicas and the other such instances.
Where do you think we are in sort of the grand scheme of things of being able to recreate human intelligence? I know Ray Kurzweil and there are a couple other people out there. I think they said that by, 2030 or 2035, something around there, that we will actually be able to create AI that is just as smart as a human. And then a couple years after that, we'll be able to create AI that is smarter than all of the collective humans on planet Earth. So if you kind of look at the AI timeline, so to speak, where do you think we are in maturity? How advanced are we really?
Yeah, and that's a fantastic. So, we have the benefit of working with, I have had the privilege of working with some of the giants in this field, the Professor Chris Mannings of Stanford, who are just intellectual giants that I hold in right from my early days when I used to work with Professor Dennis Shasha. And I've worked with some giants whose knowledge and intellect is way dwarfs mine. But I can tell you that it's not a discussion anymore amongst them when it's not a discussion if true artificial intelligence will start to rival human intellect. The only thing that is of discussion nowadays is when, and is it going to be in, as you mentioned, the Kurzweil, the singularity, and you feel that is it going to be in 2030, 35? Is it going to be, as we maintain, by 2025 you will pass someone in the hallway and you won't be able to tell if it's a human or an android? And I think that's the real difference, is that just the time horizon. If it's going to be in the next 6 years, if it's going to be in the next 11 years. And it's inevitable at this point that you will get to the point where these agents start to mimic human intellect. Now, I have to caveat that because I do a lot of this research, and I don't see human creativity is, as much as I say that by the next 2025, you will pass someone in the hallway and you won't be able to tell if it's a human or an android. And I maintain that based on the research that we are doing.
You said by 2025?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just 5 years.
Yeah, that you will not be able to tell if it's a human or an android. And that's because we are having that brain complexity come in and the conversational intelligence come in that somebody would be able to pass. And we are able to have robotic motions become fairly fluid. We know that dexterity is becoming fairly fluid. So what's left? The face we know we have got body markup language. BMLs are starting to give what is rendered in 2D. Star Trek had somebody rendered in 2D that was dead for the last over a decade. So we can render that in 3D also, and that's also becoming fairly sophisticated. And but the one thing that is missing from all the other renditions that you see of the cute little robots that you see out there, which are just cute. They are nothing but you press this button and something comes out and it says something cute and we all are fascinated. But one thing that is fundamentally missing from all those cute little things that are play toys is brain. Once you put the right brain into any of them, the rest, dexterity, the ability for them to move, the ability for them to have a conversation, the ability for them to be fluid, and the ability for them to lift a cup, all that is fairly, and thanks to our fascination with autonomous driving cars, the ability for them to be mobility part and the ability for them to recognize different objects, which we have benefited tons from collateral research being done for autonomous driving, because you're able to distinguish between realistically what is a real child versus what is a picture of a child. And that kind of sophistication exists today in these sight has come to that. What is fundamental is that while I maintain that like we will not be able to tell the distinction between a human and an android by 2025, I have to say that at least in the 3 decades of research that we have been doing, human creativity in the foreseeable future continues to be outside of the bounds of current state of artificial intelligence. What do we mean by that? I can be the stupidest person. I played chess, and I used to go to, when I was at New York University, I would go to lose a few dollars and by playing chess in the park, because no matter how good you are at chess, they'll still manage to beat you at Washington Square.
You're talking about one of my favorite topics, by the way. I love chess. I'm obsessed with chess. I take lessons. I take lessons with a grandmaster. I'm like going to play in my first tournament in a couple of weeks, so I love it.
Wow. Well, then you would do much better at the Washington Square Park than I did. But,
I don't, not with those hustlers, man. Those guys are tricky.
They actually, the problem I found is that I would think too much. And they've got the first like 20 moves just set. And but I digress, so forgive me. But I think I could be the stupidest chess player and I could still beat you. Because I have an 8x8 board and I would explode all the choices. And I would say, if I move this and Jacob moves this, and if I move this and Jacob moves this, and if I move this, Jacob moves this, and I will go down that entire tree and I would put a weighted number to each one of those positions. And I would say, okay, now I will pick the most advantageous position to me, most best weighted position to me for me to make that move. I have a limited space here. I have a bounded space and I can explode that search space. Now, whether you call it chess, and I'm not demonetizing the problem. I'm just saying that whether you call it chess, whether you call it Go, it doesn't make a difference. It is just an explosion of the state. The state space is just known to me. I can completely explode that state space.
Yeah.
And I can say all the moves that I would make, and I can say I'm stupidest person. I would say these are all the possible moves I could have made. And these are all the possible moves that Jacob would make subsequently. And these are all the possible moves. Listen, I used to play maybe 3-4 deep. You can go 6 deep, I'm sure. But I'm stupid computer programmer. I can go 8 deep, easy. And I would be able to like explode all the set, and then I will make a move based on that simple algorithm. Now, obviously, if you have overlaid the awareness of the different openings and the different positionings, you obviously can come up with your deep blues and the things that can beat Kasparov. But Do you see the idea? The idea is that you have exploded this way. Why am I ask you, Jacob, is that creative?
No, and
Can that cure cancer? Can that cure world hunger? Can that give the next Manet? Can that paint the next Degas? Can you compose the next Feralise by Beethoven on the basis of just random combination? That's where human creativity is far superior. And exploding states, sometimes it is confused that we say we explode the state. Of course it is creative. Look, it can beat somebody at Go, or look, it can beat somebody in chess. That's not creative. Exploding state spaces are not creative. Just exploding all the different things and all the trials and being able to say, I am basically, from the data set, I'm seeing this thing, is not the way that you're going to. We would never have been able to come up with the general theory of relativity, I can tell you that.
yeah.
We would never have been able to come up with the energy and mass. There would never be a time that in 1905, one man changed the world the way we know it today. The third paper, he published 3 papers, the third of which had a corollary that talked about with photoelectric effect, energy and mass have to be interconvertible. And he wrote as a corollary, E is equal to mc squared. No artificial intelligence program today, I can tell you, is capable of coming up with creative thought like that. So humans should concentrate on.
So I have a couple questions. So first, with the chess thing, I know that there was an interview a couple years ago with Magnus Carlsen, who's the current world champion, and somebody was asking him about AI and chess, and he gave this really interesting quote where he said, "Even though I sit across from a computer and I lose the game, I still feel like I'm playing somebody stupid that doesn't understand the game."
That's
And I love that quote because I think it's exactly what you said. You just are playing somebody that is, or something that's just crunching numbers, and that's it.
That's it.
But the second question I had for you, there have been a lot of articles and videos and things coming out recently trying to show that technology is getting creative. And I don't know if those things are true or not, but for example, with Go, I know that they talked about AlphaGo 0, and then there was this famous Move 10 in the human versus machine match, and they said, oh, this is the beginning of creativity. And there are videos being shared about how technology is like recreating music and painting things and writing scripts. But, and you know, a lot of people see that and they say, oh my goodness, it's true, AI is becoming creative. But that stuff, I don't know, is there any truth to that, or is that just kind of like gimmicky stuff that we're seeing?
I with all due respect to all the different technologies that you mentioned, my humble opinion is that human creativity is far superior. And there is no truth to the fact that you can't, can an agent conduct the same interview that you are conducting right now?
I hope not.
I can tell you no. And you can have a debate, and you can have debates and things on classic topics, because and you can even have like people who say like, journalistic reporters, I can actually have them artificial agents. Yes, there are, which can cobble together information that is picked from the net on different topics, stock quotes, this excerpt, that excerpt, piece it together. And here you have a writer. That's equivalent of saying, George Bernard Shaw saying, give every man a pen and tell him that he's equivalent of G.B. Shaw. You know, there is a human creativity that I hold in, and maybe I define creativity as too much, and maybe I am being a little bit biased here, but human creativity to me is the ability to create something which is unthought of, unheard of. That's creation. Yeah, ability to create a cure for cancer, ability to create energy and mass are interconvertible, ability to find a way to get and have ourselves to colonize Mars, the ability to create, to plant hydroponic seeds in Mars, and to be able to see that there are subterranean ice there, and we can actually create life form. We can colonize that another planet. And those ability to extend man's horizons, these are creative things. And I think that these are not the same as exploding an information space. And exactly as the Grandmaster said, that is not creativity. That is mechanical computation, but it's not creativity. Creativity to me is being able to create things that have not existed before, and to create the next big Degas, the next big, these things have not been discovered. We have not found the cure for common forms of even the malignancies that affect us. And I think that's where humans need to focus their effort.
Couldn't agree more.
That's the future of humans. Humans need to be able to go from the basics of like where an auto insurance company employs Amelia and gets an improved customer care and starts to release just-in-time insurance or just starts to release pay-per-mile insurance, to where humans, and new business model, reinventing the core with digital processes and extending to adjacencies and innovating on the adjacencies as we find that the boundaries between these different the silos that have separated us between these different verticals start to get dissipated by artificial intelligence and the digital undercurrency that exists between them. That to me is creative, and that's an area where humans reign supreme today, and with due respect to great minds, for the foreseeable future.
Hey, I love it. It's good to know that humans still have a place. And it's interesting because you mentioned cancer research, and I remember, I think it was a couple of months ago, I was reading an article, and it was talking about IBM Watson, and it was saying that a lot of hospitals were actually pulling back from using Watson because although it was promised to be this great AI that could help cure cancer, they found that it was taking a long time. There was still a lot of manual involvement of having to update the software. And they just found that it wasn't as effective as it was promised. Now, I mean, I don't know where these things are today. This was a couple months ago, maybe even last year. But in general, I kind of wonder if the world of AI is maybe a little bit overhyped from the reality. And I don't know what you would think about that.
I would tend to agree in its ability to creative, like curing cancer, for instance. I mean, I think yes, it is exactly. But I would say that Watson continues to be one of the most impressive analytical engines that I have known, and that's I feel that it is able to look at 100 million patient care records and be able to diagnose the similarities between what you might have as your footprint as opposed to what it has stored in its data bank. So it's obviously a very fascinating analytic engine, I feel, but its ability to, I think it will obviously provide more and more assisted care for different surgeons and others and physicians to be able to and researchers to be able to move towards curing some of these malignancies. But I think there is a little bit of, as far as creativity in being able to, and that's where doctors should focus on. Jacob, that's a very interesting question to me, because do you think, you go to school for literally 2 decades being a doctor. Before you have done your residency and everything else, you have gone to school for about 2 decades after having, and now you step out, and what do you do for most of your life after that? If you're a general physician, and again, a great deal of respect for doctors, and that's why I'm saying that. What you're doing is, like, most of the time, do you know how much time you spend in doing research on an average? This is just the math, by the way. This is not a subjective opinion. On an average, a doctor is spending about 4 hours a month doing research. Now I ask you, having gone to school for 2 decades, is it not a colossal waste of a brain power to only exercise it for 4 hours a month and the rest of it to be lost in the actual practice of it? Do you think that the practice should be done by the mundane practice of general physicians and other things should be done by cognitive agents, while the doctors can actually reign supreme in the domain that they and only they can govern, which is finding cures, systemic fixes, not tactical, looking at strategic advances to the patient care? Do you think that doctors should be absolved from common chores? This is going to happen in the next, by the same 2025, this is going to happen where your common GPs, your common general physicians are going to be cognitive agents that are going to know well before anybody else, just by your watch, that you are suffering from this, your white blood cells and these have gotten this drop, your fever and your heart rate and everything else, your systolic, diastolic has gotten this, you're likely suffering from this because I've got this patient care data on you, and I'm going to be able to send you to the nearest CVS or Rite Aid, your pharma, and you're going to get it dropped by a drone. That's going to happen on your doorstep. That is a given. Now, is that not a great use of AI? Do you know we were invited by the Prime Minister's office in India on December 10th of the year before last. And we learned, and some of the things that we've been doing, we learned that there are 472 million Indians that have got a cell phone. Over half of them do not have qualified health care. Now you tell me, would it not be a great use of artificial intelligence to bring them a qualified cognitive doctor? Really qualified cognitive doctor that can actually they can interact with on their phones and get quality healthcare. I mean, talk about truly saving lives and truly affecting the cliched a better world through artificial intelligence. And that's going to happen. Doctors should focus on creative forms of systemic remediation, which only their brains can affect for the world. And if they were allowed the freedom to, by having all these chores taken care of by artificial intelligence, the GP, all these common ailments and other things that they write prescriptions for day in and day out, if they were allowed the freedom to be able to concentrate on finding these systemic cures, which their brains and only their brains can actually give to the world, do you not think at this point we would have advanced the state of medical sciences to be able to diagnose and fix the common maladies like cancer, common maladies like NSIP and non-interstitial pulmonary disorders? No? Yeah. So would not have found the cure for that thing. And so that's what our focus should be with, again, my 2 cents on, I should say my cent and a half on this. I care passionately about and respect the intellect of creativity of the doctors. And I feel that it should be applied to systemic fixes, not tactical, day-to-day activities.
And of course, this can be applied to other areas too. Doctors, lawyers, managers inside of organizations. This could be applied to many other areas where we focus on those important human aspects. You know, in the case of leadership, the ability to build relationships, to engage people, to build great teams, to motivate, to inspire others, and let some of the other stuff like the decision making, crunching numbers, let AI do some of those things so we can focus more on that human stuff. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree, and I think we're moving in that direction.
But that's brilliantly observed by you. That exactly what you said. In all areas, you find a similar trend. Bravo.
Well, thank you. So one of the big questions that we always hear about when it comes to AI is, should we be worried? So whether you are an individual contributor or a leader at a company, you know, we see a lot of these scary numbers out there about jobs getting replaced and automated. And so we see that there could be some potential benefits like we talked about. But are there some threats? Should we be worried about not having a job? Should we be worried about losing our careers to technology?
Well, I ask you that, are we living in digital Darwinistic times? I ask you a second question. Do we have a choice? People have asked about, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? The utopia People of it's the cure for all common maladies and hunger, world hunger and peace. And the dystopian view that completely polar on this is the Hawkins Club that says this is going to be the final invention for mankind. So we have these two different poles of views, scholarly views. I ask a third question: do we have a choice? I have had the privilege of meeting many CEOs of, I can tell you, 6 out of the top 10 banks, and similarly top insurance companies. I've yet to find a single CEO that I've met who says, McKinsey estimates I can have a 45% margin enhancement by deploying a digital solution, as opposed to a 35% margin compression if I'm a digital laggard. And with 80% spread between my digital haves versus have-nots, I'm not sure whether I'm going to go digital or not. Is it not digital extinction that you face if you do not endorse?
Yeah. Don't have a choice.
And there you go. Et voila. You don't have a choice. Why don't we just wake up to the fact that when machines are, the spread is 80%. This is not about a 5% spread that we can say, I can go beyond that. This is not incrementalism. This is that radical. This is that quantum. That this is, why don't we face the reality, the mathematical veracity of the fact that the spread is so much that if you don't do that, you're going to face digital extinction. This is one part of Musk that I agree with, that if your competition has AI and you don't, you're dead. So given that, why don't we start with the mathematical antecedent of the fact that this is going to happen? When you have something that is so much more efficient, that it can get 80% spread and like 45% margin enhancement, and it can yield 40% overall gain in productivity. Why don't we start with the antecedent in this mathematical equation and say, forgive my preoccupation with numbers, I'm one of those students by training. And so once we start with that, we say, okay, now the question becomes, in this case, we know we're going to go this way. We know that these robots are going to work nonstop for us. We know that they're going to produce, the overall GDP is going to surge by another 40%. So then the question becomes, how do we thrive in this? How does man thrive in this? Who's driving this for the planet? Are we still not driving this planet? Yes, we are. So, okay, then how do we actually come up with better equations for our companies and our countries? And how do we actually come up with, and I've been invited to the at the Palais du Luxembourg in the French Senate from ex-Prime Minister Raffarin to talk about the concepts of, France obviously has explored the idea of minimum viable income with the Nordics. I was invited to the House of Commons in England, which is exploring the idea of, should we turn the clock to the, where we had to talk about artificial intelligence, and should we turn the clock back towards vocational training? That obviously is outside of the bounds of AI today. And so those things are, governments itself and the companies itself should start thinking about this AI revolution that is upon us. How do we thrive in this tomorrow? And Nordics, Finland and others have actually explored minimum viable income. And I think I continue to be a strong proponent of the fact that we should have a minimum viable income, because the productivity is going to increase by 40%. What a beautiful world. There's a French scholar that said that the whole purpose of artificial intelligence is man may spend more time à la plage, at the beach. And isn't that fantastic that we would actually be able to give humans hey, don't worry, you have these faithful friends of yours working 24/7, providing you enough bread on the table so that you don't. Human creativity is shackled by overbearing concerns of sustenance. Is that not the case? Even on any given day, even a person as scholarly as you spends only 30% of his time in creative thinking. The rest of the time you're driving a car, crossing the street, taking out the garbage. Is that a good use of your brain?
Probably not.
Should your brain be liberated from these shackles of ordinary? Should somebody come along and just say, I got the driving of the car, I got the taking the garbage out, I got vacuuming the floor, I got all these claims and processing that you have to do, and I've got all the policy administration questions that you have, and your Verizon bill will always be paid. And I will take care of that. I'm your butler. You just focus on what you do well, creativity. And would that not be a fantastic world for us to live in?
Oh, it would.
And that's where I see this world emerging to. But we have to be the drivers. There's a beautiful Volkswagen commercial that says, "In the road of life, there are passengers and drivers."
Oh, yeah, I know that commercial.
And drivers wanted.
Yeah.
But I would say that's the fascinating part. I think that companies and countries who are in the driver's seat, who are embracing this digital revolution and coming up with a formula to thrive in this digital revolution, are the ones that are starting to assume a dominant stance. 40% of the global 2000 or the Fortune 1000 are not Fortune 1000 anymore since the year 2000. Is this digital Darwinistic revolution and this digital Darwinism happening as we speak? Numbers tell an unequivocal story.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, I know we only have a couple minutes left, so maybe we can just touch on how do you start to embrace this? Because there's looking at this on the organizational wide level and kind of governments and leaders of that, but there's also individual contributors. So people who work for these big global companies, but they're not leaders or managers. They're mid-level, or maybe they're entry-level employees. Maybe they're truck drivers. Maybe they're accountants. And they are very much worried that technology will come around and replace their jobs as well. So maybe let's start with just kind of individual. Like, what does this mean for us as human beings? What should we be doing, if anything, to kind of prepare and adapt for what's coming?
Well, dust the rust off your brain and focus on creativity and coming up with things that do not play the machines on their playing field. You will lose. Do not play on mundane, ordinary chores and say, I'm going to be the Luddite or neo-Luddite, and try and stop the machines from driving cars or flying planes or driving trucks. They're going to. Because that's what they do. They are just more effective at that. Humans are more effective at, and will continue to be, at creativity. Humans should start thinking about, if I'm a human and if I have an MVI, if I have a minimum viable income, I should start thinking about, in the organization that I am in, how do I drive better processes? How do I come up with just-in-time insurance? If I'm an insurance claim, how do I come in with pay-per-mile insurance? And people are doing that, actually. How do I come in for a way for me to have a digital, if I'm a banker and I say, why will I not just have, as far as I'm controlling the digital token, I can actually be controlling the payment tokens, and I'll be able to go ahead and, outside of the vertical siloed boundaries that have existed, I can actually permeate right through them. The largest bank in Scandinavia happens to be only 2 years old. Klarna. 76 million customers. You bank with a conventional bank there, you will have to go, and if you wanted to, you charge their credit card and you buy a set of shoes, and if you want to return the set of shoes, Jacob, you will have to first get an RMA, then you would have to package that set of shoes, and you would have to go to the local post office or FedEx or something and get those shoes back. Klarna, one touch, you press the return button on your mobile, done. Klarna underwrites you, knowing Jacob well, and says, I will immediately transfer the funds over to you. I know you are a worthy client of ours, and I will take care of the shipping and logistics of it. Has it not diffused the boundaries between retail and banking? And is that not the reason why these new innovative business models are starting to become the dominant business models? Reinvention of banking. Because not just banking siloed, but banking and retail, convergence of those things, which is now made possible by the digital undercurrency. No? And so these are the things which humans should start focusing on, and humans should start thinking of rather than trying to hold on to, but I want to be still the person that is laying the typeset, or I want to still be the person that is actually spinning the wheels in the fabric. The Luddites and the neo-Luddites need to make sure that they move and embrace this revolution, my cent and a half, and they actually make a formula to try. There are 88 billion neurons that God has gifted us, and I can tell you, I continue to believe that human brain is the ultimate Darwinian engine. It is 88 billion neurons and continuing to evolve. We have to challenge our brains by not letting them pickle and say, let me come up with creative ways. And our governments and our companies should foster that. Our governments and our companies should foster intellectual outlets for our people in which they can contribute to the overall manifesto better. And as I said, I've had the privilege of talking to a few of the governments, and you can see examples of this in Estonia, and you can see examples of this in certain companies that are thriving. They have embraced digitization, and they have moved their people up the value chain.
Well, I love all these different stories and examples you've been able to share. I know we are out of time, so maybe you can just share, what is your big picture vision for where all of this is going? And then you can wrap up and let people know where they can learn more about you, IPsoft, if they want to connect with you or with the company or learn more about this stuff, anything that you want to mention for people to check out.
Well, I think your audience is rather knowledgeable, so I beg their forgiveness in advance of preaching to the choir. But where it's going is where they're writing today, where they will individually in their careers or collectively in their companies. They are self-electing. Companies are self-electing where they will sit on this digital Darwinistic curve. Everyone has a choice to make today. Do they wish to be just informed? There's this big digital tidal wave that is coming. Oh, it's here already. I have read about it. Okay. Do they want to be an experimentalist? You climb up on that digital Darwinist. Yeah, I've dipped my toe in the water a little bit, and I'm getting some marginal gains, 2 or 3, 4, 5. I'm doing incrementalism. Do they wish to be a fast follower? This is a McKinsey curve. A company says, no, I wish to be, or an individual says, I want to be a fast follower. I've identified, I'm Barclays, and I've identified certain silos. My mortgage, 62% of the mortgage origination, Barclays, doing entirely digitally. Okay, great. Or do I wish to be a market leader? JPMC, 1.2 billion credit card transactions a year. BBVA, all of Latin American banking. Telefonica, all call centers, operations, Peru and otherwise, at scale for tough accounting and billing issues. Leader, and unfortunately, I have a tendency of waving my hands so I'm trying to draw a graph of this returns curve, and you can see that the return curve goes up exponentially between the left side of the equation being, of course, the informed, goes up a little bit to the experimentalist, goes up significantly to the fast follower, and goes up way up for the leader. But we are living, Jacob, in a very interesting time. Typically, the risk curve always follows the same curve as the rewards curve. The times we are living in, the risk curve is an inverse parabola of the rewards curve. The risk of non-adoption, the risk of experimental adoption is still much greater than the risk of early adoption and the risk of leadership adoption. And that is the awareness that we need to be able to have, and we just need to be able to look at certain companies. And the risk factors are choice of the right technology. Nowadays, everything, as I said, I've been drinking smart water, which is trying to cure my large amounts of profound ignorance. But I think the smart waters and I intend to. I was in one of the conferences and I was talking about smart water when the person sitting in the front said, I love everything we are talking about, but please know that smart water is a Coca-Cola product. So, I this was the CIO of Coca-Cola, by the way. So the interesting part is that we have the risk factors are determination of the right technologies, the choice of the right technologies, as opposed to the propaganda and the marketing machine associated with different technologies. The risk factor is the organizational change. And the choice of the right technology needs to be only one yardstick. Toss all the marketing brochure aside, just concentrate on the outcomes. Ask them, what are the outcomes? Tell me the numbers, give me the cases of where real outcomes are, as opposed to the brochure ware, and as opposed to just the logo ware, which you find about tons and tons of logo wares everybody displays. And I think that, and the second is the organizational change. The ability to be able to attack the organizational change that is required to be able to change the machines of this plane that is flying from propellers to a jet engine while mid-flight. And that's the main challenges that we should focus on in our leadership capacities. But that's we are self-electing at this time as individuals and as collectively as companies where we wish to be in the next 24 months. And I'm talking about in the next 24 months, this will all unfold where we would have self-elected ourselves either to be on the leadership side, or we would have risked losing ground to the extent of facing extinction.
Seems like we all have a lot of choices to make. So where can people go to learn more about you and IPsoft? Anything that you want to mention for people to check out?
I think the IPsoft's homepage is IPsoft.com. We can't say that we are great at marketing, but we are. But you can find some fundamental information about us in IPsoft.com. My wife believes I'm having an affair with Amelia. You can find her at Amelia.com.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with me and sharing your insights about all these really, really fascinating technologies that are coming our way. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jacob. The privilege is all mine.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. My guest again has been Chetan Dube, CEO at IPsoft. Make sure to check out their company, and you can learn more about Amelia and all the fun stuff they're doing there. I'll see all of you next week.